Hello, I'm Constantin from Enviso, and today we have a very special guest. Mr. David Hutchins is an academician in the prestigious International Academy for Quality. He has received more than 20 different awards. He's author of 9 best-selling books. He was co-worker and friend with Juran, Ishikawa, Deming, Feigenbaum. Thank you, sir, for coming here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
To work with you as well.
Mr. Hutchins, you have a distinguished career in quality management dating all the way back to the 70s. Do you have any memorable moments in your collaboration with Dr. Joseph Juran that you can, of course, share with us?
I have many. I think possibly the most interesting one will be the presentation I gave at Dr. Juran's 100th birthday celebration. And he invited me to be one of the speakers. There were 4 of us that spoke at the event. And I didn't want to go over ground that other people had. So I spoke from my own personal experience. And I gave 3 short stories. The first one was on the day that Mrs. Gandhi died. And that was the 31st of October, 1984. And I remember it very well, particularly because it was the first time that Dr. Juran had come to the UK and was working with me. We ran a one-day seminar for facilitators who were using his materials that we were selling. And so we'd sold 9 sets of his videotapes by this time, and we invited all of them to come along. And we had a seminar in the Waldorf Hotel in London, which was right opposite the Indian Embassy. And we worked through the morning. It was only midday at lunchtime. And we looked out of the window, and there were ministers from our government in taxis turning up at the Indian Embassy and going in. And we discovered while we were having lunch that Mrs. Gandhi had been shot that morning. And so that was a bit of a unpleasant experience. But anyway, we got back in the afternoon, and while we were working, I could suddenly hear all this noise coming from the street. And I looked out, and I was responsible for Dr. Juran. I was running the event, and I looked out of the window, and it was absolutely packed. The street was packed with Sikh Indians with banners and everything. And I thought, oh, this is going to get nasty as the day goes on. And I've got to get Dr. Juran out of here. And everybody in the room was distracted by the noise coming through the window. And Dr. Juran very calmly at the front of the room said, he said, if I say hit the deck, he said, hit the deck, he said, but otherwise we carry on. And everybody was kind of relieved that he could take a responsibility. Strangely enough, though, about an hour later, I suddenly realized it had gone quiet. And I looked out of the window, and there was just normal everyday traffic. And I thought, how did that happen? And on the TV news that night, there was big demonstrations outside the Indian Embassy. And I thought, this was a fake, you know? So I've always been a little bit cautious when I've looked at TV news and things like that to see if it was a fake like this one. But that was that one. The second one was in another seminar we were running, and one of the guys in the audience stood up and said, Dr. Juran, he said, because Dr. Juran was talking about cost of poor quality at the time. And he said that I knew what you said about that, he said, and I tried to sell it to my chief executive and the management team. And he said they wouldn't take any notice of me with the argument about cost of poor quality. And Juran just quietly said to him, just pray that things get worse. Maybe they'll listen eventually.
Right.
And the third one, if it's okay, is he came every year, and so every October or so we would run these seminars with Dr. Juran, and we get about 100 people attending them in London. And one of the things that he often mentioned when he's talking about the problem-solving tools was he was talking about a technique called the scatter diagram, and some people call it a measles chart. And apparently it was invented by a guy named Dr. John Snow back in the 17th century. Right. We had a massive cholera outbreak in the middle of London. 600 people died in just over a week. And Dr. John Snow got a map of that part of London, and he stuck a little mapping pin in the addresses of all the people that died of cholera. And right in the center of that mass of dots was a water pump in a street called Broad Street. He didn't know what the connection was with cholera, but he went down in the night and took the handle off the top of the pump. And within days, the epidemics began to subside. So that simple quality tool, which he originated, or maybe other people had thought of something similar before, but that simple tool taught him the connection between cholera and water. And I think that was the first time people realized that. So that was a nice little story. And I went down there after I heard him say it the first time. And there's a pub there called the John Snow Pub. And on the wall by it, there was a brass plaque that said that the red flagstone in the pavement near to the pub was the site of that pump. Well, when Dr. Juran retired in 1992, I went down and I etched a copy of that plate, and I then took it to an engraver and got him to engrave a replica of that. And then he published that in the Juran Institute. And when we went over there afterwards, I was very proud to see that on the wall in the reception area.
Very nice.
So those are my sort of immediate thoughts about Dr. Juran. I don't know if it's the sort of thing
fantastic.
You want me to say.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're different anyway.
Yes. Thank you so much. We hear about the wonderful contribution of Juran we just talked about, Deming, Ishikawa, but who do you think the new generation today should learn about who's not so famous?
Well, amongst our group, I can think of several people who, if they're not famous, they should be. And one of them is the president of ILSSI, John Dennis. I really admire what he's been doing over the last 2 or 3 years. And also Kola. I met Kola for the first time in the conference in Cambridge last year. And I was very, very impressed with him. And in fact, Kola and I are working together now. But I was, funnily enough, last night, I was watching our TV, and strangely enough, I was thinking about exactly what you're saying. And I was watching, do you know Andre Rieu, the Dutch violinist and conductor? If you're not familiar with him, I very much recommend that you watch one or other of his programs, because he's an amazing conductor and organizer of huge events. And the event we watched last night was in Venice. I don't know what the stadium was, but it was enormous. One of the biggest stadiums I've ever seen, absolutely packed with people. He had this wonderful orchestra and choir and everything on the stage. And he has the incredible ability of drawing the audience and everybody into what he's doing. And I was, obviously they really, really rehearsed what they were doing. And I was thinking, you to me are the ultimate example of what I think quality should be and seem to be. So he doesn't teach quality as such, but he certainly demonstrates it in what he's doing. More than anyone I know. He is absolutely incredible. And I was thinking, to me, quality is creating an organization where everybody's working towards making us the best. It's getting that collective power of all of the people
Right.
working together. And I was looking at his orchestra last night, and I thought every single one of them is mutually dependent on all of the others. They all do something slightly different, but together they make this beautiful music.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
and they were enjoying themselves. It was obviously fun for them, and he made it fun for the audience as well. And I thought, yes, I thought in this modern time, if you want to demonstrate, now we talk about quality a lot, and I suppose it's pretty boring to people, you know, the tools and the techniques and everything like that.
Statistics and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a certain kind of brain to get excited about that, and the vast majority of people don't. But if you could liken it to something like that beautiful music that I was watching, quality should be inspirational. It brings in pride. You know, people should be proud of what they do. They should have self-respect. They should respect others and be respected by others. And to me, that is the ultimate of quality. And yes, of course, we need all the tools and the techniques and the methods and so on in industry, etc., to make it happen. But the ultimate goal, I think, has got to be something like that. So I don't know if that answers your question or what you expected, Stan.
Fantastic.
But
Fantastic parallel between music and quality. I like to make parallels between music and physics as well. Good. Now, back to the quality. If you could choose only one tool or method to help you gain a better understanding on how to improve a process, what tool or method would you use?
That's a very difficult question, really, because it tends to be situational. I think in one set of circumstances, I might look at one possible tool or some tools, and in another others. And I think if it's something where it's repetitive work, like high volume manufacture, then for me, without question, I would want to do a process capability study on the process, because this was how I first came into quality myself anyway. I was a student in production engineering back in the early 1960s, and I learned X bar R charts. And in order to improve my own understanding of it, I went back to the factory, and fortunately, I had a lot of free hand to do a lot of what I wanted to do. I was production engineer at the time, and I picked a machine, and I had the textbook by the side of me, and I did what it said: take 40 samples of 10 samples of 4 of the product coming off, and so on, plotted all of that, and then charted the dots on the, with the warning limits and action limits and so on. And what I couldn't understand was that a lot of the dots were outside the limits. And I thought, well, mathematically, this is weird, because it was the dots that created the lines on the chart. How come the dots are outside the lines? Then I made my first discovery that it's based on the idea that the data is normally distributed.
Right.
It turned out that it wasn't. So then the question is, why isn't it normally distributed? And it turned out the machine had a cracked bed. And this was known in the factory by everybody except me, or by the managers. The managers didn't know, but the people in the factory did. So I got that dealt with. I cut a long story short. I then did it again, and it was better, but I made more discoveries. And eventually we got the machine to operate so well, it was questionable whether you needed to check any coming off it at all. And I realized that just in that one experiment, this was an amazingly powerful diagnostic tool.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it was supposed to behave in a certain way. It didn't. And these tools taught me how to do that. Now, that's great for repetitive, something doing repetitive work, where you're getting a stream of products that are supposed to be all the same. But in another situation, I was impressed once. I was running a course in a company, a cement manufacturing company, in fact, and I was doing the problem-solving tools, and I'd split them up into groups to go off into separate rooms, and they were working on it. They chose their project, worked on a project, came back in and did presentations on it. And one of the groups came back, and they amazed me because they said that they had to choose their own problem, and they couldn't think what problem to choose. And one of them had the idea, why don't we look at late payments? Because some of their customers were paying them after 90 days, even 120 days in some cases. So they managed to get hold of the data on late payments, assembled it, and they found out that a significant proportion of the late payments weren't because the customer was using them as a bank, but because the customer wasn't happy with what they got. So one of the best sources of customer dissatisfaction information can be on late payments.
Late payments, yeah.
So they brought that in, and I taught them Pareto analysis. And so they did Pareto analysis on the causes of, not the causes of, but on late payments. And it turned out there was one that stood out more than anything else. And so they attacked that as a problem. So in that situation, I think you could say Pareto, but also it's a good idea for people to look at late payments.
Absolutely, yes.
It's not where you expect to be looking.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this short interview. I'm looking forward to meeting you in Bucharest together with John Dennis, Kola, and many more. Yeah.
Me too. I really enjoyed the event in Cambridge.
In Cambridge.
I'm convinced that your one is going to either equal it or go beyond it. It doesn't matter either way because it was excellent. And I'm looking forward to that. And you mentioned Dr. Juran, as I think I have mentioned to you, that I'm hoping while I'm there to take a few days and go up into the Carpathia Mountains and hopefully track down his village. I know the name of it. And that would be really nice to see his roots.
I would be happy to be your host.
I'm just hoping that if we do it after the event rather than before, that maybe one or two others might want to come along as well. Yeah.
There are beautiful mountains in Romania, indeed.
I bet they are. I've looked at the photographs. You have a beautiful country.
Sure. Thank you so much again.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.